What? Here's Brunette. Brunette's in. Andrew Brunette shot score. Andrew Brunette in sudden death overtime, and Minnesota is moving on.
I won't need my high school diploma anymore. I am the smart. I am the smart. I am the smart. I am the smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T.
Played here by Danny Heatley, and out they come 2-on-1. This is Niederreiter holding onto it, and he scores! Nino Niederreiter wins the series for the Minnesota Wild.
I think Giles is
Not today.
Anyway, let's get started. It's podcast time. Welcome, everyone. Giles and the Goalies podcast. I'm Charlie Beatty. With me, Ben Remington, Giles Farrell. Not quite as lubricated as he was last week. Not even close. I would call you coherent at this point.
If there are any Colorado Avalanche fans who are out there listening to this one, I'm not sorry for my remarks last week.
Yeah. To apologize. I was going to.
You know where to go.
Would it be bizarre if we had listeners that were Colorado Avalanche fans? Don't you think? It'd be a little weird.
Yeah, there's probably one out.
I mean, we're
probably,
a pretty specific niche.
I'm probably telling them to get bent in a sense, but I'm not sorry for my remarks last week on the podcast, and actually, my open last week on the podcast with "Have you met Ted?" will probably go unmatched. So there you go. I peaked podcast Giles.
So bad time to tell Giles that next week's featured guest will be Nathan McKinnon.
Oh God,
Patrick Waugh.
how do you feel?
It's the week after.
How's your nose? Okay, all right.
Well, we could go
That's
on
enough
for
of
days.
So there's not a ton going on in the hockey world right now, but yet we're going to find things to talk about because that's what we do. Obviously, there's one huge thing going on, the Stanley Cup Finals. We are 2 games in. Depending when you're listening to this, Game 3 is either rapidly approaching or later tonight. And, gentlemen, your thoughts on the first 2 games? Very, very interesting, both in their own right.
Yeah, I think that it's still maybe was a little bit more of a feeling out process than we saw in the at least especially in the conference finals and before that, obviously with the divisional play. But it was really a feeling out process. You saw it in the first game where Chicago kind of, maybe rope-a-doped a little bit and didn't really show up to play for the first 2 periods, and then did their typical Chicago magic and managed to pull out 2 late goals and win the game. And then last night was, maybe a little bit more of the same, maybe a little bit more of a reaction from Tampa Bay where they kind of figured out like, okay, we have to do this and we have to do that, and the goals came fast and furious, which I don't know if that's a sign of of poor play one way or the other, or if it's a sign of those teams getting more familiar with each other and not playing quite as passively. But it was entertaining. Obviously, I mean it was a pretty good back and forth game, a fair amount of scoring, and whatever happened to Ben Bishop and his poor adult diapers, I'm not really sure, but. I'm sure we'll find out more about that, and I think that's going to dramatically affect the rest of the series.
Everyone's so convinced that he was pooping his pants.
No, he wasn't, but it's a funny thing to run with, I do not think that happened at all, but that's just kind of the joke.
Yeah,
he tweeted it. I saw that.
His experience from, I think it was like 2010 or whatever, and he just tweeted a toilet
emoji, question mark.
Twice, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Like eating quesadillas in between periods?
I tweeted that he had some questionable Chinese food.
That was
in the locker room.
Maybe.
The Wild Extra account made a reference to a Simpsons episode where Homer kept eating a sandwich that was 6 days old.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out what the actual injury is. I know Corey Hirsch, former Rangers and Canucks goalie, and I think he works for TSN now, but
he works for Sportsnet.
Sportsnet, that's right. He tweeted something about just that goal that was scored where Hossa kind of knifed his stick into his goal pads, how it's easy with that kind of movement for you to tweak something in your groin. So, and that would make sense because, it didn't seem like Bishop was hobbled necessarily, but, the groin injury for a goalie, you wouldn't necessarily notice it, but he's definitely going to feel it.
Sports hernia? Did he get backstrommed?
I don't think so. It didn't seem that, because if it was that, I don't know if maybe he would have gone back into the game like that, because he came back into the game and he could, he just you didn't see him move much. He wasn't in for much longer after that, but he essentially came right back out a couple minutes later.
Well, people kind of think that the goal, non-goal, I think it was Seabrook's goal, the third goal for Chicago.
Yeah, the one where Hossa
interfered with him. Might have done something, but from what everything I've read is that he was not good even before.
Yep.
That.
Yeah, he had a conversation with a couple defenders before that goal.
And I don't know. And Jon Cooper just I was following along on Twitter. He met with the media like an hour ago, and he still didn't reveal who was going to start. But basically, he just was like, "Whatever goalie I throw out there, we're gonna win." So good for him. From everything I've read, Andrei Vasilevsky
is a really highly regarded prospect.
He's actually thought of better than Ben Bishop, who's very good in his own right.
Yeah.
So
if
you're
he
thought
might
of
be
better
the best
than
goalie prospect in the league, I think.
If you're thought of better than the starting goaltender on your team, then you probably got something good going for it. Unless you play for Edmonton.
Ben Bishop might want to get back out there. He might be playing for Edmonton next year. I do like Jon Cooper's attitude, though. He's totally got that, I'm not even supposed to be here today kind of mantra going on in the finals, which they probably aren't.
A little Daryl Sutter, maybe, where he just doesn't care as much.
Well, Daryl Sutter's more
I think
because he doesn't actually care.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Jon Cooper's just one of those things where it's like he knows he cannot lose this series.
Right.
You know what I mean?
He's playing with house money.
Right.
Yeah,
any other coach, lose the finals, and say it was Ken Hitchcock. He loses the finals, not that he'd be playing Chicago in the finals. But say Ken Hitchcock was the coach of Tampa Bay, loses the finals, people will be like, is Ken Hitchcock the right guy? Nobody's going to say that about Jon Cooper, so he's just like, yeah, whatever, man. I'm not really even a hockey coach. I'm a lawyer.
But Ken Hitchcock also is rolling with a third line of Ryan Reeves, Steve Ott, Marcel Gottsch. So,
is it on him or the GM, though? So tough to say.
Surprisingly, St. Louis has invested another year of
Marcel Gottsch. He scored
Hitchcock.
against the Wild twice this year with two different teams.
How dare you?
You would know that.
Only because I was writing about it earlier.
Right.
Wasn't that one of those, the January 13th game against Pittsburgh?
Yeah. Yeah, he did score in that game. Yeah, that was the same week that Vernon Fiddler scored on the Wild twice. So it's not that they were terrible then. They were getting beat by really bad players. Anyway, we won't get back to that.
No.
But the finals, I guess Game 1, go back to Game 1 for a second. The analogy I draw from Game 1 is like when you see like a street brawler fighting like a 7th level black belt. And the street brawler spends like 10 minutes just sort of preening and jumping around and saying like,
sure,
I'm gonna kick your ass and all this kind of stuff. And the black belt's just kind of standing there like yawning, like dusting his fingernails off. And then after the guy's done, just roundhouse kicks him in the face and knocks him out with one shot. I mean, that's what that game seemed like. It was the Lightning coming at him for 2 periods, and Chicago's just like taking it because they're fine and they know that we're just better.
Yep.
And we're going to turn it on when we need it, and then they did.
The thing of it was it wasn't like your typical Taves, Kane, Sharp, or Hossa, or Seabrook, whoever.
Right.
It was terrifying.
Teuvo.
Vermette who scored the goals in Game 1. And
did you just say Teuvo?
Teuvo.
Oh, Teuvo.
Teuvo.
Anyway,
I thought it was Teuvo.
Teuvo? I thought it was Teuvo. I thought it was
saying probably wrong.
I think it's
all right.
Anyway,
I think we should spend 15 minutes trying to figure it out.
We're good at pronouncing things, Gronland.
Who was it in the Wild that kept changing? Zidlicky?
No, Zidlicky.
Zidlicky.
It went from Zidlicky to Zidlicky to Zidlitsky.
I have a different pronunciation of Zidlicky that includes a profanity.
I've got a bleep button, so feel free if you want.
I want to keep it on air, unlike
You're not a fan?
the Jared Mason podcast. So, but
I think most of that was because he was in shock because he had a giant plate of tater tots.
That was a giant plate of tater
that's
tots.
true. I don't blame him.
It's a couple podcasts back in case you missed it.
But no, it wasn't your typical suspects that won that game for Chicago, and then it was their depth players, and
Right.
Those are becoming their typical suspects, though. I mean, Teravainen has as many points in the playoffs as he did in the regular season.
Yep. And
And for Matt, I mean,
that's concerning if you're a Wild fan, because Teravainen is stepping up to the next level, and
True.
he's going to be
That's what we said about Eric Halla last year. I'll wait until he's done it for a
How
full
dare
year.
you?
no, he will because it's Chicago and that's what they do.
How dare you
That's
speak ill of a Gopher?
They don't inflate a playoff performance. I mean,
Right.
I honestly think that as
It's
Vermette
just-
was celebrating his goal, he was doing a cha-ching sound.
yes, he was.
Because he scored 2 game-winning goals
Somebody
in the
is.
playoffs.
And
Right.
I shouldn't, but I feel bad for Chicago because they gave up a first-round pick for him, and that wasn't.
Are you
that
allowed to
wasn't
feel bad for
smart.
Chicago?
I think somehow
They're still. No,
Yeah,
they'll probably win
their
it all.
third Stanley Cup?
Yeah, they'll give up that first pick, and no one will care.
At least they didn't do what the Kings
I-
did. Give up a first round pick. to
honestly, they
someone.
probably don't mind because in 5 years they're not going to be able to pay that first-round pick anyway.
That's
He
true.
turns out to be a good player. So
True.
They can give up all the first-round
have
picks
to-
they want right now.
they have to
just
keep-
rent people.
Gambling on undrafted college free agents that they continue to sign.
Yeah.
That's basically lines 3 and 4 for
Yeah.
Chicago next year. Will be undrafted college free agents and probably their third pair defenseman.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless they somehow find a way to unload Corey Crawford.
Which I doubt.
And
Well,
unless you're Edmonton, then you might say, what the hell?
Yeah, and I
Darling Edmonton goalie next year.
yeah, and I think Game 2 was yeah. I think Game 2 was a pretty stark contrast, because it obviously didn't take nearly as long to develop, and we saw Crawford kind of allow some goals that weren't necessarily super soft, but they were the kind of goals that really infuriate Blackhawk fans. And it wasn't a situation in Game 1 where he weathered the storm pretty well, I felt like. Last night he did not weather the storm pretty well. And then on the other side you have Ben Bishop, who may or may not have crapped his pants. And and he somehow, doesn't get the win in that game, unfortunately for him. But, also had some, iffy goals maybe. But a whole lot of offense as opposed to the first game where it was really just kind of one goal for, 56 minutes and then, 2 quick punches to the nose and Chicago hightailed it out of there.
Ben Bishop.
You can't really blame him on either one of those. The Game 1 goals. Bishop.
No, I don't think you can either.
Especially not Vermette. I mean, that was
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, that was a
shot.
laser, and he couldn't see the Teravainen goal at all. He had no look at that whatsoever, which is what they're doing a lot of.
3 of them were on his own team.
And that's something that I noticed, especially last night. I think a handful of goals from each team were really heavily screened, and that's something that especially Chicago likes to do. Segueing a bit to the team that we cover, that's something that I don't see nearly enough of out of the Wild.
Look at how many times last night there were 6-7 guys in the crease, in
Right.
Chicago's crease
Right.
area.
Yep.
I mean, Tampa just floods people in front.
Yep.
Whether that was my Twitter or the Wild Extra Twitter account, I noted that Tampa had so many guys just in front of Corey Crawford that he couldn't see the puck, and it was like, you have to start taking notes on it. You have to put somebody literally in front of him so he can't see anything, because against the Wild, he will stop everything he sees. That's where his confidence is. You have to make him not see the puck.
Oh,
The draft guy.
drink down.
What? And I mean, to your point about Crawford, he's one of those guys that he's always played just well enough. to be the number one goalie for Chicago. I mean, he has these terrible games, and then when they need him most, he comes back and he does it for them. And that's why he's got a Stanley Cup ring for them. That's why he's been a part of a bunch of deep playoff runs. And there are always going to be people like us who make fun of Crawford because he does let in some horrible goals.
And his rise against injuries.
Yeah, but he just comes back.
Or you'll make a commercial just off of the Crawford chant.
Oh, God. Don't get me started.
Can I apply for a job in the Wild marketing department?
Yeah, tell me about it.
You can. I'm sure there's,
It's probably not openings.
Pick up an application.
Yeah, but who knows?
You're the only one holding you back. What else about these two games? I mean, I looked at our previews for all of our staff writers' previews. And for the most part, I think there were a few dissenters, but we all picked Chicago. And a lot of us, I did, picked it to be a pretty short series.
Yeah.
I went with Chicago in 6 because I think Tampa will put up a good fight. Maybe kind of resembling what the Wild did with Chicago last year, where it was they did put up a good fight, but it'll just come down to possibly a game 6 in overtime. And that's it. And I don't know. For me, this just feels like the last big hurrah for the Blackhawks in terms of this core of their players.
Yeah.
So everyone wants to go out on top. And, I don't discredit what they're going to do for the future because I think they'll still be good, but I just don't know if they'll be this good down the road.
This series, I can't help thinking about it more so maybe than I have any Stanley Cup Final series, at least in recent memory. In terms of what are we going to look at this series, or what's it going to look like in retrospect, like 3 or 4 years from now, or maybe 5 years from now? Because I'm thinking back to when Chicago beat Philadelphia. The Flyers were opponent. That could have been anybody.
Right.
Chicago was the only team who was in that series.
Yeah.
Same thing when the Kings beat New Jersey.
Yeah.
I stumbled across Game 6 of that series on YouTube. The whole game's on there. And I was just thinking to myself, why were the Devils even there?
I forgot that they were until recently.
I found this I see this every once in a while, but you come across that New Jersey game with LA, and they just got destroyed.
Well, because they gave up a 5-minute major penalty in the first period.
And it was also Martin Brodeur just totally went downhill. He had totally overplayed everything in the first 3 rounds, and then he came back down to earth in the finals. And it was just Zach Parise was the captain of the New Jersey Devils.
Well, they still had Kovalchuk.
Right.
It's not that they didn't have good players, but you just look back at it and it's this team had no chance.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of how we look at the Rangers from last year.
Kind of, yeah.
Which is terrible because I love Henrik Lundqvist.
The only series that I can look back since 2010 and say I felt like both teams had an equal chance to win it was Boston-Vancouver.
Yeah.
And
that was a good series. That was the last Game 7 that we got.
The Detroit-Pittsburgh series from 2009 was an even one.
That was a good one. Really good.
I'm curious as to how we're going to see this one. Are we going to look back at it and be like, oh, yeah, the Lightning, they were there, but they were just like the other team.
Right.
There.
Can the triplets actually hold their own?
Right.
Yeah.
I think just because, and obviously it's too early to say, but I think just because of the talent that Tampa has and the fact that it's not, they don't have any mercenaries really. They're relatively homegrown and young and really good. I think it does resemble that Detroit-Pittsburgh series where you've got one really established franchise with recent success, more veteran players, a much older team against a team that's super young and has just piles of talent. Granted, Pittsburgh hasn't done anything since then, but there's a lot of reasons for that. But and maybe the same thing happens at Tampa. I don't know, but I think that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about a young, talented roster is it gets expensive fast.
Yes, but I think that just because the youth and the talent that they have, they really resemble. This series really resembles that series to me. No matter which way it goes, really. I mean, even if it goes still 5 games, it's still somewhat of a coming out party for Tampa. depending on how things go. I mean, just getting Steven Stamkos further into the consciousness of the casual hockey fan, I think, is a good thing for the NHL.
That's a good transition because, I mean, there's a lot. Stamkos is kind of a talking point in this series. People writing about how he hasn't played enough. I felt like, for what I've watched of Tampa this year, and I previewed their first 2 rounds for us. Or maybe I previewed all 3.
Probably did.
Yeah.
That Stamkos, I mean, obviously he had a scoring drought to start the playoffs, but I feel like he just hasn't been that noticeable as a player. What you would expect the guy who I think scored the second most goals in the league.
He's not in line with Killorn and
Filppula, right?
Filppula, yeah. So I don't blame him for kind of going in and out because clearly you're going to put your best defensive center up against him whenever you can. So obviously Chicago, that being Taves.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's when you need your secondary scores.
Like the triplets line. Right.
But are they the secondary scores? I mean, I think if you totaled them up, that line's got to have more points than guys like Killorn and Filppula.
Yeah, might. They might. Didn't
Johnson had almost as many as Stamkos during the season.
But even, actually, I think I want to say I mentioned this in some kind of article I wrote either tomorrow or for Thursday whichever one. I don't even know if I wrote that. I might have tweeted it. Steven Stamkos he revolves around the power play.
Yeah.
And the Tampa power play has just not been that good through 2 games because Chicago has shut down the fact that they cycle it around to it. It kind of mimics what Washington does with Ovechkin. They cycle it around. Ovechkin kind of hangs out at the face-off dot like Stamkos will. And then he will fire a one-timer that most times during the regular season he will score. That hasn't happened yet. In fact, I don't recall Stamkos taking any sort of a shot. So I obviously credit to Chicago's penalty kill, but that's where Stamkos gets a lot of his goals, is power play from the face-off dot.
And also in the same fashion, Ovechkin will get him on that off-wing side.
Yep.
He does that. I mean, nobody does it as well as Ovechkin, but Stamkos gets a lot of those. And, it's just he just hasn't really looked like himself, whether you think that's Chicago shutting him down or whether it's, maybe Stamkos not playing up to his capabilities. Obviously, there's always injury considerations in the playoffs that you never know about until things are done. But who knows?
It's hard to tell because I don't view Alex Killorn and Valtteri Filppula that highly, so I could be wrong. But
they're good players. They're not game breakers.
They're not great players, but they're good players. But maybe he could benefit from having somebody else on his line. Somebody else who could maybe take a little bit of pressure off of him so that the defense isn't truly entirely focused on him, but
Jonathan Drouin?
Yeah. Put Drouin on his line. See what happens.
I see what you did there.
Well, we can go to player controversy number 2.
Jon Cooper has a Mike Yeo, Jason Zucker kind of dislike right now. So.
Well, it's one of those things where it's is this a big deal? And if you don't know what we're talking about, apparently, Drouin is not necessarily as happy with Cooper as he could be, and vice versa. Is this just a young player who needs to know that he's a young player, even though he's even said, I'm 19, I'm still learning a lot, I'm not playing every day, whatever.
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit to that, and a part of it, if you're 19, you're a young player, you've still got a lot to learn.
Yeah, player at 35 points.
Right. But it just...
When you're playing a 7th defenseman over Jonathan Drouin, then I kind of start to question the logic. I guess I'd rather have Drouin play over the 7th defenseman, but I guess I don't know. I'm not an NHL coach.
Yeah.
Not Jon Cooper, so I don't know. Clearly, he knows something I don't.
The funniest part of this for me in the last 48 hours has been the amount of, and usually team-themed blogs that have said oh my God, can we trade for Jonathan Drouin? The answer is no.
No, you can't.
If you want to give up one of them that I saw was Colorado Avalanche blog.
Well,
and I was like, yeah, you could maybe trade for Jonathan Drouin. give up McKinnon and you get Troy back straight.
Yeah, that's about it.
There are only 2 picks separating them in the draft.
Right.
So it's one of those things where it's like, I love how quickly people are putting the fire on the smoke of a situation that could just be handled internally by the Lightning.
Purely conjecture. Like, it just, you think it's bad now, but then by the time next season rolls around, like, Druin will be like on a third line because somebody got moved or they didn't re-sign someone or whatever. You know, you don't know.
He's going to be a good player. Right. You know what I mean?
He was, wasn't he the 2nd overall pick or 3rd overall pick? Yeah.
Because Barkov went 2nd.
That's right.
Still trying to figure that out. Seth Jones 4th.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was
this
one
year's
of the...
draft could be very similar to that. I mean, after the top 2.
Right.
I think one of the ProHockey.com writers actually tweeted last night, just think of what Tampa Bay could be if they had drafted Seth Jones instead of Jonathan Druin. Seth Jones is actually pretty good right now.
Yeah, he's good.
I think Druin is pretty good right now. I mean, he's not a very good defensive player. When did he ever have to play defense for Halifax?
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
You just go out there and score 150 points.
Well, a lot of those juniors, too. Every game is 6 to 5. You know, I mean, there's
Halifax, but I meant, I believe he's a St. John guy.
Whatever.
St. John Sea Dogs.
Yes, he does. Sorry
Zach
about that.
Phillips.
Pierre McGuire. Pierre McGuire's going to have my legs broke for getting that wrong. Clearly, I'm not fit to be between the benches. Although I can talk about banter between the 2 benches.
I haven't seen the Sportsnet broadcast. So maybe you could be Glenn Healy's fill-in.
Oh yeah, all I have to do is be angry at everyone. You guys ever watch Glenn Healy on a broadcast? He's the angriest man on earth.
Wow.
That's funny because I thought
the
that was
backup
Mike
goalie for the
Milbury.
1994 Rangers was not as good as it was cracked up to be. I think Glenn Healy's private hell would be he is between the benches doing a broadcast, and on one side of him at all times on one bench is Sean Avery, and on the other side of him at all times is, I'm trying to think of a good, another guy of Sean Avery's ilk, and I can't think of somebody right now. But just a yapper, just somebody who doesn't quote unquote respect the game, which Sean Avery totally doesn't. But,
right. Tomo Ruutu?
All I can think of is
Jarkko Ruutu.
Jarkko Ruutu?
All I can think of is Matt Cook, but
Radulov?
I don't think I can.
Alex.
There we go. Radulov. There we go.
Is it the 2nd week in a row we've mentioned Alex?
It is. That's why I thought of him, because we talked about him.
We mentioned him last week.
Yeah. Giles, you don't remember, but
Surprise.
on the plus side, last week he didn't spill any drinks, so I guess,
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's give and take.
Spilled. This week, 1 drink spilled. Clever editing, and you'll never know.
Sorry, lousy condensation. Also putting a depth grip on all previous
I watched
drinks.
that happen in slow motion.
Yeah, I did too.
I mean, it just sort of slid out.
Yeah.
And we need that slow motion opera cliche.
Although, good thing I have a credit at the bar, so hopefully I don't have to pay for that one.
The Norm Peterson of Grumpies.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's put it on his tab.
You just have $1 million tab that I'll never have to pay.
Right.
Clavin of Grumpies? Do you know him?
Not that I know of, but I haven't met him yet, so there could
because he's a cheap knockoff. He doesn't work for the Postal Service. He works for DHL or something.
Yeah, he works for FedEx.
Is DHL still around?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they're still around.
Yeah.
Just check.
Yeah.
That was an insult towards Cliff on Cheers.
Crap, and then they would cite Federal Express, which apparently you had to use its full name back in the day. I don't know why that exactly was, but they would joke about how easy it was to be a mail carrier. There was even an episode where Norm hired a chimpanzee to deliver the mail to Cheers, just to make fun of Cliff, because Cliff was making fun of how easy it was to be a painter. which Norm was doing at the time.
I think it was a couple weeks ago when
Your Cheers trivia.
I've seen every episode, so yeah.
weeks ago when
I'm your guy.
David Letterman was going through his final week. I watched the Cheers episode where Cliff, Norm, and Cliff's mom went to the Johnny Carson show because Cliff thought he had
wrote him
some
jokes.
for Johnny, and Norm had to pay him off. Had to pay one of the guys off who hold the
Cue card,
that
yeah.
Johnny read. And he was like,
And the joke's
he's like,
just
you
bomb.
Sure this joke will totally bomb. And he was
Yeah.
like, yep. And then it did, and Cliff got kicked out, and then Cliff's mom got his good time.
It was a good episode.
All right.
We actually, Ben and I actually missed a golden podcast because we could have just sat there and we could have just ripped on Letterman and Leno and a couple other things for the entire time over Memorial Weekend.
Yeah, it happens.
Could have been there.
Yeah.
Could have
I'd have called
been.
it.
Could have been. It's always
You were in Hawaii, so, you know.
like
2
what,
in the afternoon,
what,
it's fine.
what could have been had Gabrick gets the puck past Jaguar in game one, or I don't know.
Are you equating that back to Cliff Clavin on Johnny Carson? What could have been if the joke didn't bomb?
True.
Okay. This is a very interesting Cheers interlude for
yeah.
this podcast.
Episode 20, the Cheers podcast.
That is, I think, the proper episode. number.
Yeah.
As
Either
long
19 or
as
20.
we don't note twice in the podcast notes that I'm annihilated, that's good.
Can we note twice how you dropped a drink on yourself?
We can note it once.
Well, I'm the one who writes these things. I say we can do it twice.
I do have to go in and clean it up a little bit.
There was a considerable
I
amount of
have
cleanup
to
when you
go
spilled.
Yeah.
in and put it under podcasts. Just so when I want to click on podcast to look down, I have to
Oh.
put it there. So
I'm
there you
completely
go.
unaware of these
I'm gonna be that
categorization
picky
things.
guy
You
here.
want to be a co-producer.
Wow.
Whatever.
What an uninteresting look behind the
It's
curtain.
getting dicey in here. Is it hot in here? Is it
That
just
is
me?
uninteresting.
Oh, good thing I got the fan blowing on me.
Yeah, it is that we are sitting in the coldest seats in Grumpy's, and I'm wearing sandals. This is a bad idea.
No, that'll happen.
Let's get back to hockey.
Sure.
Oh, that's still going on?
Well, there's some stuff. Well, I mean, obviously, in a couple weeks we've got the draft coming up, and we're not going to get into it full on now. We will eventually, I believe, be doing some mock picking
We're
on
going
this
to have
podcast.
a mock
Yeah.
first round. I think we're going to get Nate Wells
Yes.
on here.
Yeah,
and,
we'll see if we can figure it out.
Yeah. We'll put our collective
Don't worry, there will be some
minds
serious
together.
time
Yeah.
considerations on every pick. It's not gonna be like,
Yeah.
you have your full 5 minutes and you
Actually,
trade it.
that's probably something we'll have to figure out beforehand, just so we can know what's going on before we actually.
Oh, yeah,
we don't
no.
want to have
We-
10 minutes of dead air before every pick. So
Well, we can pause it,
we're here
luckily,
for 10
but
hours.
We'll just hire James Duthie to come in and fill that time. Speaking of which, you will not be hearing TSN's people at the draft this year. NBCSN is actually going to do their own
oh wow.
really.
their own draft, which
I didn't
means
know that.
might mean more Millberries. So I'm sorry.
Oh,
Thank God I'm going to Tom Reed's.
But anyway, the draft is coming up, and one thing that the three of us have been talking about is kind of the wild draft prototype player,
Strategy.
right.
and how a lot of their prototypes, in terms of the mock drafts and the draft list that you look at, are kind of falling into that
Yeah.
18 to 23 area. A bunch of players that would be like, all right, we drafted that guy,
Yeah.
and it's not exciting.
Right. Right. Yeah, it just seems like all the players that mock around that area.
First of all, we should probably explain what we think the draft prototype
Oh, sure,
is.
yeah,
Maybe
it's-
one of you guys can do better than me.
Your typical wild draft prototype is just basically somebody who, I guess, is more of a fantastic two-way player.
Yeah.
Plays a great 200-foot game. He has some good offensive qualities, but he has some good defensive qualities too. He might not necessarily pan out offensively, but he's there defensively.
Like,
So-
guaranteed you're going to get at least a
Right.
third liner out of
So
this.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
High
So
floor.
if you- when you draft a first round pick on somebody like that, he probably projects to be at best like a third line player.
Which
So, like, I
is
guess
so exciting.
right.
But
Which,
yeah.
It's
Not
okay.
that you should necessarily be guessing
Right.
for more than that with pick number 20.
Which I guess
but-
would be okay. Like I guess if you had some previous like first round picks where you were like, you know, in the top 5. You know, you drafted somebody with fantastic offensive talents. You know, like Chicago has with Kane or Taves or whatever. With the Wild, they haven't necessarily drafted that offensive.
No.
Well, it seems like they can almost kind of steer themselves away from drafting that. Like it's more of a fear of failure than a let's roll the dice. kind of
Right.
thing. I mean, obviously last year we had the glaring example of Tuck over Hosang, which a lot of teams made that call. So that's not the best necessarily example, but
Yeah.
you know,
And I don't even know that Tuck fits that prototype necessarily either. I mean, I think he's a bit more of a power forward than the Wild would typically draft, which was nice, but it was still a little disappointing that they didn't take a shot on a guy like Hosang, which
Are you that disappointed?
No,
Just because I think he's a total head case.
Yeah, so I can see that, but it's just I know what you mean with the whole passing on upside for essentially trying to redraft Mikko Koivu.
There's upside and then there's crazy, which I think Hosang moves into crazy.
Yeah, I guess.
You think of a guy like the classic faller that we've sort of talked about in drafts that we kind of referenced during the finals is Brandon Saad, who was when he was coming out in that draft, he was in mock drafts probably put anywhere between like 18 and the end of the first round, and he ended up going in the 40s. Chicago snapped him up, and meanwhile the Wild could have picked him at 28, and they took Zach Phillips instead. I mean, obviously the Wild are not the only team. Probably every team missed on Brandon at least once.
Yep.
And he's turned out to be a very, very good player.
Well, from what I read, like this is a very deep draft, so you could still draft a very good player, regardless. At 20. I think that's what the Wild had.
20.
Although I'm kind of with the consensus where you'd like to see them take a gamble on somebody who has a little bit of a higher upside offensively.
Yeah.
Because as I'm going to write on draft week is some players do pan out offensively that can come in the late 20s in the first round.
Sure, absolutely.
Anaheim is built on that. Both Flaff and Perry are guys that were drafted after 20th.
Wasn't Tarasenko taken 20th?
No, he was like 13.
He was 17th or something.
Yeah, I thought he was. I thought he was in the teens, deep teens. 19?
I think it was like 16, something like that. But
all right.
Oh no, that's right, because they took somebody else 13th and then took Tarasenko 16th.
I think like my biggest thing was like I kind of looked at like post the 2004-05 lockout was like Giroux comes to mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of good players down there.
There are a lot of fantastic players. You have to find the key is you have to find them and develop them.
Yeah.
Or you end up with Angelo Esposito. If you don't know who that is, look him up.
Have a bottle of whiskey on hand if you do choose to do that.
Well, I don't know if that's a painful memory. It wasn't our memory.
Right.
Painful Thrasher / Penguin memory.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be done, and that's why when we said we were talking about this earlier off the podcast, like this is the year I would love to see if there's like a guy that might be a higher tier mock draft player who slips down to 20, and you feel like this draft there's so many good players.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
There might be somebody that slipped to 20
go after it. And I'm not saying it's going to be Mitch Marner, but maybe like a Pavel Zacha or just that type of name. I'm not saying not one point anyone specific.
There's a few people I have in mind that you just feel like if they're still there at 20, the Wild will take them just because of their ability to play both ends of the ice. But I'm more in like the consensus that if somebody does slip that has a higher upside, they should gamble, take them.
You've got 10 players who can play both sides of the ice. Do you need one more?
No, you don't. I'm with you on that.
This is the year you go for the game breaker.
You need to find one of those because clearly, as we saw against Chicago in the playoffs this year, is you need to draft and develop one of those players at some point.
Yep.
And obviously, we got a couple weeks to go, so we may, in between now and then, kind of talk about some of the names that are out there. We're going to write a lot about some of the names that are out there, us three, and a lot of the other writers, too. We're going to file some reports on players that could be picked. Some of them you may have heard of, some of them you haven't. Some of them are local players.
Sure.
So it could happen. It's going to be a really interesting draft day all around.
I'll give you a spoiler. Connor McDavid will not be available at number 20.
Or Jack Eichel.
I've written 1,000 words on what could happen.
Actually, what are you guys' thoughts on Jack Eichel saying he will be the better player than Connor McDavid?
I have no problem with him saying it. I have a huge problem with Tim Murray telling everybody that he said it.
Yeah, I don't understand. There's no upside to that at all.
No.
None. I mean, if you have that kind of confidence, that's great. And I'm sure for Eichel, it's got to be a pain because he's been compared to McDavid, for over a full calendar year now. When in respects to this draft, I'm totally fine with him saying that, just because he's probably sick of hearing about McDavid. But there's no reason, unless you're planning on not taking him if you're Buffalo, which is also stupid.
Right.
There's no reason to do that. It makes no sense, and unless you're planning on, trading that pick or not taking him, I don't understand that for Murray either. It makes no sense at all.
No, they're going to take him, but the thing about it is, if you ask a player how good do you think they could be
right.
in a pre-draft interview and they don't say, I want to be the best player in the league, you don't pick them. I don't care if it's their last pick in the 7th round. If you're going into the NHL, you should at least have a goal, even if you know in your head you're not going to meet that, a goal to be the best hockey player of all time.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're cheating yourself.
Yeah.
But if you're a GM, don't tell anybody, because it's just going to bring on a media firestorm that's not going to fall on Murray. It's going to fall on Eichel.
Yep. Which isn't fair to him.
It'll follow him around for 15 years.
And that's what I loved. I guess that's what I love / hate about that came out was Eichel saying he's going to be the better player, which is fantastic for Buffalo because they're going to get a player who's just full of confidence. But then you let that out and you're bringing the wrong kind of attention on that situation.
And Eichel's the guy who's already brought enough attention to himself. Obviously those videos of him drinking a beer and yelling stuff and not stuff that probably
out of a college kid.
I know.
So he's the next Tyler Seguin, so he's going to go to the lowest bidder.
He's the next Danny All-Star. It's high praise, I realize, but
1507 people.
All right.
1517, Jack Eichel. But he's clearly an outspoken kind of guy. He's clearly a really confident, bordering on, or maybe going way over the border of really cocky. But that's fine, as long as he doesn't hurt civilians with that attitude, then he's fine.
Sometimes it is okay to have a cocky attitude.
Yeah. You don't think John and Taves is cocky? I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Patrick Kane, he doesn't take crap from any cab drivers.
That's right. He can party in Madison with the best of them, but who cares? That's his life. He can do what he wants.
Right.
As long as he's showing up for work on time for the Blackhawks, which he apparently does.
And winning cups, they don't seem to mind.
So, that'll be an interesting one to monitor, because Eichel did come and say, I'm not real happy with the fact that he told everybody.
Right.
And I'm not saying this is going to cause an Eichel-Murray Buffalo Sabres rift or anything like that, but if it did, that's how those things get started. So you don't want to give yourself even an opening to get the player upset at you.
Let's get Chuck Fletcher on the podcast, because him and Tim Murray are good friends.
that Buffalo hotline that he has.
Yeah, Chuck, tell everybody Tim to shut his mouth.
The bat phone to Buffalo.
If you want to take the second pick, you probably can move up at this point, because Tim kind of blew it. So.
I don't know if we'll go that far.
If only.
Yeah, right. So, well, I mean, on a light hockey week with not a lot to talk about, and it looks like a pretty good birthday party going on at the table next to us. I think that might be time to shut her down for the week, but we'll be back sometime next weekend, maybe Sunday or Monday, with more stuff. Who knows? Stanley Cup Finals might be over.
Could be.
Break down Corey Crawford's inevitable rise to stardom / fall into the abyss of overpaid contract hell.
Right.
But yeah, we'll call it for the week. Stay with us all week for some more articles on everything that's going on, and hopefully starting up soon some draft stuff. So for at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell, I'm at the Unplayable Charlie Beatty, saying so long from the Giles and the Goalies sober style podcast.
Your third fiance didn't show. Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows